Welcome to today's webinar. It's on time management and focus. And my name is Sarah. I work for the graduate school here at CU Boulder. I recently graduated from CU Boulder with a PhD in geography. And I'm super excited to be here talking to other graduate students about some of the tips and tricks that worked for me, as well as acknowledging that the main thing I want you to get out of this today is, yes, a few tools to put in your toolbox, but more importantly, a recognition that not everything works. Not everything will work for you, and so it's good to really develop a system of being mindful and aware of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. That's the main thing. The main key takeaway is to pay attention to which habits are fueling your work and which habits are starting to bring you down. Now, I do have a few things that I know work for me that I'll share with you, and hopefully that will be helpful. My first piece is to say, put down your phone. This is a personal thing that I have noticed in my life, is that when I allow myself to be bored, I allow creativity to be born. And when we have our phones, if you notice, we are very rarely bored anymore. Anytime we are waiting in line or we are taking a walk, we're listening to something, we're talking to someone on the phone, and we don't allow ourselves to be bored as much anymore. And this can really not only cause us to be used to distraction, but it can also cause us to fail to leave our brains that time and space that we really need to do that hard analytical work that is required by graduate school. So I recommend that everyone buy and read this book, How to Break Up with Your Phone by Catherine Price. It changed my life. I learned how to identify some of my tendencies, my addictive tendencies towards smartphones, and just pay more attention to the world around me and be more present in my life. One of the tips she gives in the book is to say, think about a problem that you need solved and go boil a pot of water and just watch the pot of water boil. Obviously, don't take out your phone, don't do anything else, don't listen to music, and see if any solutions arise in the process. So I encourage everyone to try that. The next thing is to establish your skeleton. So for me, my skeleton is food, water, sleep, and exercise. These are the things that I can't function without. Of course, we're humans. We need water. We all know this. However, actually taking the time to drink water throughout our day is difficult. It's hard sometimes. I say as I take a drink of water. Having healthy food, getting enough sleep, establishing an exercise routine. All of these things are kind of our skeleton. If we don't have these things, everything else is going to become much more difficult. So, as I mentioned already, kind of the number one thing that I want everyone to kind of walk away from today is to know yourself. And what do I mean by that? It's very philosophical, but what I really mean is to pay attention. Pay attention to what you are doing on a micro level. What are you eating for breakfast? Is that affecting how you're feeling for the rest of the day? What doesn't work for you? Maybe having a the alarm go off in the morning doesn't work for you. You need to let yourself sleep as long as you need to sleep. Maybe having strict structure where you have every hour planned out doesn't work for you. Maybe you need to do something a little bit more flexible. For example, one of my students, with her exercise routine, she does not establish a time or a place when she is going to exercise. She just tells herself, I'm going to try to exercise 4 hours this week. And whenever she feels like exercising, whether it's walking, biking, swimming, she goes and exercises, but she doesn't put those kind of strict deadlines on herself or saying, okay, I'm going to wake up every morning and run, or I'm going to run every evening. It's not like that. It's just at some point this week, I'm going to try to exercise for 4 hours. And she breaks it up into chunks of different periods of time. What are you currently doing that you know works? Keep doing that. Really focus on establishing what you already know works. Maybe you know that exercising in the morning makes you feel good for the rest of the day. Maybe you know that eating eggs for breakfast helps you stay satisfied and full for several hours. Maybe you know that setting strict deadlines for yourself works for you, whether it's a daily deadline where, okay, I'm going to read 1 article per day, and I'm only going to spend 1 hour on each article. Setting kind of those strict deadlines works for you. Maybe you know that deadlines make you too anxious, and that doesn't work for you. My next tip is to track your time. There are lots of different ways you can do this. You can use Microsoft Excel. You can use a software called Toggle, T-O-G-G-L. You can just use a pen and paper, but track when you are actually working and record it for the next week. There are a couple reasons for this. If you have ever been on a diet or training for a significant athletic event, you know that tracking your calories is important because it keeps you aware, it keeps you mindful, and it keeps you accountable for how much you're actually eating. Because sometimes we don't know how many calories we're actually eating and burning, but when you record it, you have a record of it, and you can track that for a number of different purposes. It's the same with when you're working. So first, it keeps you accountable, and second, it actually provides positive momentum to keep going because you can see how much you are actually getting done. And it feels really good at the end of the week to look back and be like, I have a record of all of the things that I have done this week, and this is when I was actually working. And then it also provides yourself reliable data to help you better understand yourself. It helps you better understand when are your peak work hours, when are you most efficient, when are you actually getting the most work done, how long does it take to get certain tasks done. So when I first started graduate school, I really struggled with this piece. I would try to plan too much in one day because I didn't know how long reading was going to take. But once I started tracking my time, I knew it took an hour to read 20 pages, for example. And so I wouldn't plan to read more than 20 pages in 1 hour. Same with writing. I knew that it would take me about an hour to write 500 words. So I wouldn't plan on writing more than a few pages every few hours. So that became really important for me because it was really key for establishing realistic goal setting because I kept trying to do too much. I was over planning. I was trying to pack way too much in one day, and I would just get discouraged. So it's really key to better understand how much time it takes to get stuff done. And once I kind of was tracking my time, I mean, it takes a while. I was tracking my time for about a year before I really started to feel like I could adequately estimate how long I was going to take to do things. And then it's also helpful to understand what's your maximum number of work hours per day. A lot of research shows that most people, their maximum number of productive work hours, meaning hard analytical thinking work, is 4 hours a day. So if you can track your time, see how much time you're actually spending on email versus how much time you're actually spending writing or reading, will help you better understand what's your max. And for most people, that's 4 hours. And so that was really important for me to understand, because I was trying to do 8 hours a day because that's just what our capitalist society tells us we should do. And it was really discouraging because I wasn't hitting those numbers. But then once I realized that 4 hours was my max, I was able to hit that every single day, and it felt really good. So I have a few tips that I have gathered over the years. So my first number one tip is, after you turn off your phone, email, and social media. So this is when you are sitting down to do some sort of hard analytical thinking work. Maybe it's writing for a paper, for a class, for an article, for your dissertation. Maybe it is writing a grant proposal. We do a lot of writing in science. Maybe it's some analytical work, analyzing, coding, something where you need all of your attention. That's what I'm talking about. You want to turn off your phone, email, and social media. It is hard sometimes to set those boundaries at first, especially with email, if your advisor is emailing you and expecting immediate responses. But the reality is that your advisor probably will not notice if you don't email him for an hour or two. You can check your email after an hour or two, but when you're actually sitting down to do some of that concentrated work, it's good to turn it off. So once you do that, one thing you can do is write down your 3 most important tasks for the day. Most of us are juggling multiple projects, and that can be really confusing. It can be really hard. It can be really, I can feel really scatterbrained sometimes because I'm like, I have so many different projects going on at the same time. But pick your 3 most important ones. Usually those 3 will emerge. The other projects after the 3rd project, I mean, if you get those 3 most important tasks done for the day, then you can go on to your other projects. But generally, you can pick the top 3, and the other projects you're working on can probably wait until tomorrow. Then you want to break everything down into manageable tasks and concrete actions. Okay, so your most important task might be, for example, create a resume. Then the concrete actions that you're going to take, this is just an example here. You want to really focus on action verbs: find, write, create, format, search, send, right? I noticed that some of my students really struggle with this. They'll kind of be very vague. And the reason why they're vague, they might say something like, read articles, instead of read X article by Y author. We really want you to be very specific about exactly what you're doing. And the reason why they're vague is because they don't know, because they haven't taken the time to really break down the tasks. This is going to take time. It's probably going to take at least 1 hour a week to set up which tasks you're going to do that week. And then in the morning that day, it's probably going to take 15 to 20 minutes in the morning to really sit down and think about what, or longer, to think about what these tasks are going to be. So you do want to take the time to really sit down and write all this out, whether it's on your computer or pen and paper. Now, you do want to set some boundaries for yourself. Like sometimes I can get carried away. I could spend all day organizing my task list. And then, I could spend 4 hours a day, organizing my task list, and then I don't have any time to actually do my work. So you do want to make sure that you're not spending too much time on this, but you are dedicating time to really sitting down and being mindful and intentional about where you're putting your time. And that time should be in those most important tasks. So my next tip is to have a pen and a blank Post-it next to you, and whenever other things come up in your head, you write down any other to-do tasks that come to your mind. So what that might look like is, let's say you're sitting down to write your grant proposal, and you're typing away, everything's fine, and then you remember, oh yeah, I need to make a dentist appointment. So you're tempted to open up Google, search for dentists, make some phone calls. You're on hold for 10 minutes. You look at your calendar, figure out, write down on your Post-it, make dentist appointment. And you keep going, writing away, doing your thing. Everything's great. And then you remember, I need to text Erica about our plans for this weekend. Don't take out your phone to text her. Write down on the Post-it, text Erica about Friday plans. Oh crap, I need to go grocery shopping. I need to do laundry. I need to empty the dishwasher. I need to get my oil changed. I need to wash my car. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Write it down on the Post-it. As soon as you're done with the task that you had put out for that time period, you can go back and do those errands. Those errands are important. They probably involve family and friends. Those things are obviously important for our lives. But when you're actually in the moment and trying to do the task, make sure you don't stop the task to do those things. My next focus tip is to incorporate rewards. So we're all graduate students, so we're not made of money. So these don't necessarily have to be food rewards. They don't have to be expensive rewards. It can be something as simple as, I get to check my phone when I finish this task. That's one of the beauties of turning off your phone or putting your phone away when you're working, is that you can actually use that as a reward. I find this really helpful for me. I get to take a walk. I get to close my eyes. I will treat myself to something when I finish this task. Maybe it's coffee, maybe it's tea, something simple, low sugar, of course. Or maybe you need chocolate, and that's fine too. But something to treat yourself. Some people will have a jar, and they'll put $1 into the jar every time they do something, and then when the jar fills up, they treat themselves to something that would be expensive, or something they wouldn't normally treat themselves to. So I'm a huge dork, and I have written up some of these tips for improving focus in an article that I wrote for the graduate school at this URL. So I'll send this PowerPoint out to everyone on this call, and you can kind of read the article at your leisure. It has more tips in it and some links to outside resources as well that you might find useful. So my lesson number 2, something to always keep in mind is that almost all of us are constantly oscillating between freedom and stability. This is true for our love lives. It's true for our hobbies, our friendships even sometimes, but it's also true for our work. We need freedom. We need some sense that we are agents of our own lives and we determine our destiny. So I'm not saying that you need to be totally strict, 100% disciplined all the time, doing everything at XYZ time every day. Like, no, you need some freedom. And one of the beauties of being in grad school is that you do have freedom. But it's a double-edged sword, and I know a lot of students really struggle with that freedom. And it's because we all need stability. We need this sense of routine, and routine can be really comforting for a lot of people. And so that's why I encourage everyone to, even though, there's going to be freedom in graduate school and there's always a variety in what we do, I think all of us need some sense of routine. And so sometimes that routine might just be exercising every morning and then you do whatever you want to do the rest of the day. Some people, it might be doing the same thing at the same time every day. So find out what works for you, but just keep that paradox in mind as you explore yourself. So within that idea of freedom and stability, most of us need some kind of structure to establish some of that stability. And that's one of the things we lack in graduate school. Most people we know work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and they just go in and they work and then they leave. But we don't have that in graduate school. So what does that really mean? It means that you have some sort of agreement about the time, place, and or task. So for other people who are in the working world, that time, place, and task is very clear. And they don't have a lot of freedom, but you do have a lot of freedom. So you get to decide what kind of variety you need. Some people need a lot of variety. Some people don't need any variety. Some people need a lot of freedom. But almost all of us need some sort of designation across time, place, or task. So, for example, some people like to work on one task for the whole day. I can't do that. I like to change tasks every 20 minutes or so. And I might go back to tasks after an hour or two, but I really like to change up the task. But I like to be in the same place all day. Some people, they can work on the same task all day, but they need to change places. They might be at the library for a couple hours, at a coffee shop for a couple hours, and then at their office for a couple hours. Some people like to work for 5 minutes, and then they'll work for a burst of 3 hours, and then they'll work for 5 minutes or something like that. Some people like more regularity, working in chunks of an hour or working in chunks of 2 hours. Some people always work in the morning. Some people like to sometimes work in the morning and sometimes work in the afternoon. But it is good to designate at least one of those things during your week. Either designate the task you're going to be doing, designate where you're going to do it, or when you're going to do it. So like I mentioned before with the exercise example, some people might designate the task and the place, but they don't like to designate the time because time, either the schedule or time restrictions make them too anxious. So they'll designate, okay, I need to work on this task. Let's say an article, they know they need to work on the literature review and they've done their concrete tasks for the literature review, find articles, read articles, outline articles, etc. And they'll designate, okay, I know I'm going to work on at the coffee shop on Monday, at the office on Tuesday, at the library on Wednesday, but they don't designate the time. They just wake up whenever they want and they kind of go, and they really need that freedom. So it just depends on everyone. But find out what works for you. Experiment with it. Some people work with some unstructured time and some structured time, toggling back and forth between both. So I have some students who their Mondays and Wednesdays are totally structured, and then their Tuesdays and Thursdays are totally unstructured, meaning that they still get work done, but they won't designate they might designate the place, but they won't designate the time or the task. they just kind of need that freedom on Tuesdays and Thursdays so they don't feel too stifled or suffocated. So those are just some examples. This is an example schedule that you can try to work out. I enjoy doing this. I use Google Calendar to kind of designate my writing time. And so I will make writing time an appointment in my Google Calendar in the same way I would make a doctor's appointment, in the same way that you would not skip a doctor's appointment unless there was some like very extreme emergency. You're not going to miss an appointment with yourself to do your writing. Block it out in red, block it out in purple, block it out in some color to designate that that is a high priority for you. Don't keep those, don't let yourself down. Keep those appointments to yourself in the same way that you wouldn't flake on a friend to go on a lunch date. So don't flake on yourself when you make a date for yourself for writing time. So for this spreadsheet schedule that I have here, maybe you designate place. So it'll say coffee shop, coffee shop, coffee shop for 8 to 10, and then lunch at home from 11 to 12, and then office from 1 to 5. Or maybe you just designate the task in those blocks and you don't designate a place, and you let the place be more spontaneous. That's just an example of something that you could try to chunk out those tasks into hour blocks. So what I suggest everyone does, and you can do this now or you can do it later when you have time, but at some point, sit down, turn off your phone, figure out what are those 3 most important tasks for next week, identify the concrete actions, and think about one area where you would like to improve. We could always improve more, but sometimes we get too overwhelmed with wanting to improve everything all at once. So I don't suggest that you try to wake up at 5, exercise every day, and start reading 10 articles a day all at once. Identify one area. So if exercise is going to be your one area, then just focus on exercise and let everything else kind of fall into place. Once you have exercise down as a habit, then you can focus on some of that other stuff. Maybe you want to improve on checking your email. So don't focus on anything else. Just next week, just focus on not checking your email when you're working. Just focus on one thing at a time. I think that's helpful. And then always think about what goal and outcome do you want to see with improved focus. More time with my kids. More time with my partner on weekends. More time for myself. More time for this hobby that I love. Hiking, climbing, biking, skiing, all those things that we love in Colorado. Maybe you want to see a publication. Maybe you want to see your dissertation. Maybe just graduation is your goal. Identify what that is, and be really clear with yourself about why you're doing this. Because we can spend all day on our phones. We can take longer than we need to graduate. We can spend all our weekends working. We can do that. If you want to spend your weekends working, then do that. But if you want to spend your weekends with your partner, then some things might need to change. And so keeping that in mind can be helpful for staying focused on what you're doing. I'm going to email out a little worksheet too that will help you write down some of these questions. I really encourage everyone to spend some time writing this out. And this is something that I saw at a workshop recently, was this stop, start, continue, and arrive. This is a framework for establishing some new lifestyle changes. What do you want to stop doing? What do you want to start doing? What do you want to continue doing? And where do you want to arrive at the end? Okay, so are there any questions for me?
This is all super helpful. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything you're thinking about, like in terms of what you might want to incorporate this week or next week?
Yeah, I think definitely like the tips for distractions are helpful in terms of like keeping a note next to me so that when all things are flying through my mind, I can kind of hold them for later.
Good.
And I think I'm sort of thinking about like how to prioritize the most important things while I do a lot of lab work also. So sort of like balancing lab time, making sure it happens with making sure writing time, etc., are also happening.
Yes, that's a major thing for a lot of grad students. Are you an RA?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so one thing